Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to welcome you all today. Today, we're going to explore a fascinating and important topic: nationalism in India. This presentation will take us through the roots, development, and impact of Indian nationalism over time. So, let's get started and delve into this captivating subject. Let's explore the key moments that shaped India's freedom movement. We start with the First World War, which significantly impacted India's political landscape. Following that, the Rowlatt Act was enacted, leading to widespread protests and unrest. The Khilafat Committee emerged, uniting Muslims around the Ottoman Caliphate issue, and the non-cooperation movement gained momentum as a mass protest against colonial rule. Repression by the government, including the tragic Jallianwala Bagh massacre, intensified public outrage. In response, Mahatma Gandhi launched the Satyagraha movement, promoting nonviolent resistance. The movement aimed to challenge unjust laws and inspire collective action. We also saw the use of powerful icons and symbols, like the spinning wheel, to foster a sense of belonging and national pride. However, fears within communities, such as the Muslim community's fears, led to limitations in the movement's scope. The Pune Pact of 1932 was a crucial development, addressing issues of representation for depressed classes. Meanwhile, the Salt March of 1930 symbolized civil disobedience against the salt tax, uniting millions. The civil disobedience movement represented a major push towards independence, but it faced setbacks, leading to a temporary slowdown. Throughout this period, various regional and rural movements, like the Chauri Chaura incident and tribal uprisings, showed the widespread nature of resistance. The Dandi March was a turning point, inspiring mass participation. The overall movement was complex, involving negotiations like the Gandhi-Irwin Pact and addressing demands from different communities, including Muslims. Despite setbacks, these efforts laid the foundation for India's eventual independence, driven by a shared sense of collective belonging and a deep desire for freedom. First of all, the war created a new economic and political situation in India. It led to a huge increase in defense expenditure, which was primarily financed through war loans and higher taxes. Customs duties were raised, and income tax was introduced to cover these costs. Villages were also called upon to supply soldiers, and this forced recruitment in rural areas caused widespread anger among the people. Then, around 1918 to 1921, India faced severe hardships. Crops failed in many parts, leading to an acute shortage of food. This period was also marked by a devastating influenza epidemic. According to the 1921 census, approximately 12 to 13 million people perished due to famines and the epidemic. These events had a profound impact on India's social and economic fabric, setting the stage for the growing demands for independence. On this slide, we see a powerful moment from 1913, when Indian workers in South Africa took a stand. Mahatma Gandhi was leading a march through Volk Rust, heading from Newcastle to Transvaal. This march was more than just a walk. It was a bold act of resistance against the racist laws that denied non-white workers their rights. When the marchers were stopped and Gandhiji was arrested, it sparked a massive wave of support. Thousands of other workers joined the Satyagraha, or nonviolent protest, to fight for justice and equality. This event highlights how Indian workers in South Africa not only faced discrimination, but also played a crucial role in challenging unfair laws through peaceful resistance. It connects to the larger story of how Gandhi's advocacy for nonviolent protest began and how it became a powerful tool for social change. In January 1915, Mahatma Gandhi returned to India, bringing with him a new approach to resistance known as Satyagraha. The core idea of Satyagraha is rooted in the power of truth. Gandhi emphasized that seeking the truth and fighting for justice doesn't require violence or physical force. Instead, if the cause is genuinely just and against injustice, then nonviolent resistance can be incredibly effective. A satyagrahi, or someone practicing satyagraha, doesn't seek revenge or act aggressively. Rather, they win through patience, moral strength, and nonviolence. Gandhi believed that this approach could ultimately lead to truth triumphing over falsehood. This concept of nonviolence, or Dharma of nonviolence, was more than just a strategy. Gandhi saw it as a unifying force for all Indians. It was a way to bring people together across different backgrounds and beliefs, fostering a collective strength rooted in moral conviction. So, the idea of satyagraha is about asserting truth and justice without resorting to violence, trusting that moral righteousness and perseverance will lead to ultimate victory. In 1917, I traveled to Quetta in Gujarat to support the local peasants who were demanding a relaxation in the collection of taxes. This was a crucial moment because it showed how active resistance could be organized to stand against unjust policies. Then, in 1916, I went to Champaran in Bihar. The purpose was to inspire the peasants there to struggle against the oppressive plantation system, which was exploiting them. This was one of the first times we saw mass civil disobedience led by ordinary people, and it became a turning point in our movement. Later, in 1918, I headed to Ahmedabad in Gujarat to organize a satyagraha among cotton mill workers. These workers were demanding higher wages, and through nonviolent protest, we aimed to show that their rights could be fought for peacefully. All these efforts highlight the core idea of satyagraha, using nonviolent resistance to challenge injustice. Each of these campaigns was about empowering common people and proving that they could stand up for their rights without violence. This approach became a powerful tool in our struggle for independence. The Rowlatt Act had been hurriedly passed through the Imperial Legislative Council, despite the strong and united opposition from the Indian members. This law gave the government enormous powers to suppress political activities, essentially allowing them to detain political prisoners without trial for up to 2 years. It was seen as a very harsh and unjust law. In response to this, Gandhiji, in 1919, decided to launch a nationwide satyagraha, a nonviolent protest, against the proposed law. Mahatma Gandhi believed in nonviolent civil disobedience, and he wanted Indians to oppose such unfair laws peacefully. The protest was set to begin with a hardal, or a day of strike, on 6 April. This was a significant step in the fight for Indian independence, emphasizing the power of peaceful resistance against injustice. Rallies were organized in various cities, and workers went on strike in railway workshops, which really showed the strength of the movement. Shops also closed down across the country, signaling widespread unrest. The British administration was quite alarmed by this popular upsurge, especially because it was disrupting key lines of communication like the railways and telegraphs. Fearing a loss of control, they decided to clamp down on the nationalists. Local leaders were picked up from Amritsar, and Mahatma Gandhi was barred from entering Delhi, which shows how serious they were about suppressing the movement. Then, on 10 April, a tragic event occurred. The police in Amritsar fired upon a peaceful procession. This violence provoked widespread attacks on banks, post offices, and railway stations, escalating the conflict even further. In response, martial law was imposed, and General Dyer took command, which marked a very dark chapter in this struggle. This sequence of events highlights how peaceful protests turned into a brutal crackdown, but also how the movement's momentum could not be easily stopped. It's a crucial part of understanding the overall fight for independence and the sacrifices involved. Now, let's take a closer look at General Dyer's infamous crawling orders. This refers to the instructions he supposedly gave to his troops during the Amritsar massacre. The key point here is that Dyer reportedly ordered his soldiers to crawl or move slowly towards the crowd, which was a way to instill fear and maintain control. It's important because it highlights the brutal mindset and the level of intimidation Dyer sought to impose. This order, whether literal or metaphorical, underscores the severity of his actions and his view of suppressing unrest. Connecting this to the overall theme, it shows how colonial authorities used fear and violence to maintain dominance, often disregarding moral or ethical boundaries. So, this crawling orders becomes a symbol of the oppressive tactics used during that era, fueling debates on colonial brutality and resistance. On 13 April, the infamous Jallianwala Bagh incident took place, a moment that marked a dark chapter in our history. On that day, a large crowd had gathered in the enclosed ground of Jallianwala Bagh. Some of them had come to protest against the government's new repressive measures, while others were simply attending the annual Baisakhi fair. Many of these villagers were from outside the city and were unaware that martial law had been imposed. Without warning, Dyer entered the area, blocked the exit points, and then opened fire on the unarmed crowd, killing hundreds of innocent people. This tragic event shocked the nation and became a symbol of colonial brutality. It's important to remember this incident as a stark reminder of the fight for justice and our collective struggle for independence. Now, Mahatma Gandhi realized that for his movement to really gain momentum across India, he needed to build a broader base of support. But he also understood that uniting Hindus and Muslims was crucial for this. So, one effective way to bring these communities closer was to address the Caliphate issue. You see, after World War I, the Ottoman Empire, which was the spiritual center for Muslims, was defeated. Rumors spread that a harsh treaty would be imposed on the Khalifa, who was the spiritual leader of the Islamic world. This threat alarmed Muslims everywhere, and it became a rallying point. In response, Muslim leaders like Muhammad Ali and Shaukat Ali took the initiative to form the Caliphate Committee in Bombay in March 1919. Their goal was to organize a united front to defend the Caliph's authority and oppose any unjust treaties. Gandhiji, seeing the importance of this issue, began discussions with these leaders about mobilizing mass action in support of the Khalifa. This was a strategic move. By engaging with the Caliphate cause, Gandhi aimed to foster Hindu-Muslim solidarity, which was vital for his broader movement for independence. This connection between the Caliphate movement and Gandhi's efforts highlights how intertwined these struggles were, and how they aimed to unite people across religious lines for a common cause. As news of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre spread, we saw a surge of protests across many towns in North India. Crowds took to the streets, and what followed were strikes, clashes with police, and even attacks on government buildings. The government's response was incredibly harsh and brutal. They aimed to humiliate and terrorize the people. Satyagrahis, or peaceful protesters, were forced to rub their noses on the ground, crawl on the streets, and do salam or salute to all the sahibs, which were the British officials. People were flogged, and villages around Gujranwala in Punjab, today in Pakistan, were bombed. Seeing that the movement was turning violent, Gandhiji decided to call off the protests. This chapter highlights how oppressive measures were used to suppress the freedom movement, and it underscores the turning point where Gandhiji realized the need to reassess the strategy to protect the integrity of nonviolent resistance. Gandhiji believed that the non-cooperation movement should unfold in clear stages. First, it would start with the surrender of titles that the government had awarded, symbolizing a rejection of colonial authority. Next, there would be a widespread boycott of civil services, the army, police, courts, legislative councils, schools, and even foreign goods. The idea was to withdraw support from all institutions that upheld British rule. But Gandhiji also prepared for the possibility of repression. If the government responded with force, then a full civil disobedience campaign would be launched, encouraging people to deliberately disobey unjust laws. During the summer of 1920, Mahatma Gandhi and Shaukat Ali traveled extensively, rallying people and building support for this movement. Their efforts helped mobilize the masses and set the stage for a united front against colonial rule. Let's talk about the Nagpur session of 1920. Congress was initially hesitant to boycott the council elections scheduled for November 1920. They were worried that pushing for a boycott might lead to rising tensions and even violence among the people. Between September and December, there was quite a bit of internal debate within Congress. It was a tense period of trying to find common ground. Finally, at the Nagpur session in December 1920, Congress managed to work out a compromise. This was a crucial moment because they decided to adopt the non-cooperation program. This movement, which combined non-cooperation with the Caliphate movement, officially began in January 1921. What's really important here is that various social groups participated in this combined movement. and a key demand across all groups was Swaraj, or self-rule. This session and the decisions made there marked a significant step in the Indian independence movement, showing unity and a clear direction forward. The movement in the towns really gained momentum through widespread participation of the middle class. We saw thousands of students leaving schools and colleges, which was a powerful statement against colonial rule. Headmasters and teachers also resigned from their positions, showing their support for the cause. Even lawyers gave up their practices, signaling a refusal to cooperate with the colonial system. In addition, the boycott efforts extended to elections. Most provinces saw people boycotting council elections altogether. This was a clear rejection of colonial authority. The movement also targeted foreign goods. People started boycotting them and even picketed liquor shops as part of the protests. As this boycott movement spread, more and more people began discarding imported clothes. Instead, they chose to wear only Indian-made clothing, especially khadi, which became a symbol of self-reliance and national pride. This shift in clothing choices led to an increase in production at Indian textile mills and handloom industries, supporting local artisans and industries. Overall, these actions in the towns showed a collective effort to challenge colonial dominance and promote Indian self-sufficiency, aligning perfectly with the larger goal of independence. So here we see that khadi cloth, despite being a symbol of self-reliance and Indian pride, was actually more expensive than the mass-produced mill cloth. This made it difficult for poorer people to afford it, which was a significant challenge in promoting the movement. At the same time, we noticed that students and teachers started returning to government schools, indicating a partial revival of the educational system. Additionally, lawyers went back to work in government courts because there were no viable alternative Indian institutions at that time. These points highlight some of the practical difficulties faced in sustaining the national movement, especially when economic and institutional hurdles slowed down progress. It's important to see how these factors interconnected and impacted the broader push for independence and self-sufficiency. In Awadh, the peasant movement was notably led by Baba Ramchandra, who himself was a bonded laborer in Fiji before becoming a leader here. This movement was primarily a fight against the oppressive talukdars and landlords, who demanded high rents and taxes from the peasants. These landlords often forced peasants to perform bigar, which means unpaid labor, and work on their farms without any compensation. The core issues driving this struggle were the demand for the abolition of these high taxes and bigar, and also the social boycott of oppressive landlords. To challenge these landlords, panchayats organized Nai Dobi bans, which were protests where they deprived landlords of essential services, even those of barbers and washermen. It's also important to note that the Oud Kisan Sabha, which played a significant role in uniting farmers' demands, was led by prominent leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru and Baba Ramchandra. This rebellion in the countryside highlights how peasants organized themselves to resist economic exploitation and social oppression, connecting to the larger theme of rural resistance against colonial and feudal structures. As the movement gained momentum in 1921, we see that it wasn't just a peaceful protest. It started turning more confrontational. Houses belonging to talukdars and merchants were attacked, which indicates a shift towards more aggressive actions. Bazaars, the economic hubs, were looted, and grain hoards, those essential supplies, were taken over. This shows how deeply the unrest was spreading into everyday life and community structures. Local leaders played a crucial role here. They told peasants that Gandhiji had declared that land should be redistributed among the poor. This was a powerful message, and it was being used to justify the actions people were taking. The name of Mahatma Gandhi was being invoked to give legitimacy to all these actions and aspirations, even though Gandhi himself was advocating nonviolence. However, despite these intense activities, the overall movement ultimately failed. This highlights that while the movement inspired many and mobilized large sections of society, it didn't succeed in achieving its immediate goals. This failure is an important part of understanding the complex nature of the struggle for independence, showing that progress often involves setbacks. In the context of the larger narrative, it reminds us that movements are dynamic. They evolve, face challenges, and sometimes don't reach their goals immediately. But each phase, including setbacks, adds to the overall journey towards independence. In the Gudam Hills of Andhra Pradesh, a militant guerrilla movement emerged during the 1920s. This was a time when the colonial government had closed off large forest areas, which led to increased resistance among the local tribes and rebels. Alluri Sitaram Raju became a prominent figure in this movement. He claimed to possess special powers, such as making accurate astrological predictions, healing people, and even surviving gunshots. The rebels believed he was an incarnation of God, which helped him gain immense loyalty and support. Raju encouraged people to wear khadi, promoting Indian-made cloth as a symbol of independence, and urged them to give up drinking, which was seen as a harmful colonial influence. However, he also believed that true Indian independence could only be achieved through physical force, leading him to organize attacks on police stations and attempt to eliminate British officials. Unfortunately, his movement was eventually suppressed, and Raju was captured and executed in 1924. This story highlights how tribal resistance, fueled by a mix of spiritual leadership and desire for freedom, played a crucial role in challenging colonial rule. It also underscores the importance of indigenous movements within the broader struggle for Indian independence. Workers also had their own understanding of Mahatma Gandhi and the idea of Swaraj. Under the Inland Emigration Act of 1859, plantation workers were not allowed to leave the tea gardens without permission, and in reality, they rarely received such permission. When they heard about the non-cooperation movement, thousands of these workers defied the authorities. They left the plantations and headed back to their villages, believing that Gandhi's call for Swaraj meant that they would be given land and freedom in their own communities. However, on their way home, they faced numerous challenges. A railway and steamer strike left many stranded, and when the police caught them, they were brutally beaten. This highlights how the fight for Swaraj wasn't just about political independence. It also involved the struggles of ordinary workers who believed in Gandhi's vision and wanted to reclaim their rights. Now, let's talk about what happened at Chauri Chaura in Uttar Pradesh. It was initially a peaceful demonstration in a local bazaar, where people gathered to express their support for the movement. However, things took a drastic turn when the demonstration turned violent, resulting in a clash with the police. This incident was a significant turning point because it showed how quickly peaceful protests could escalate into violence. When Mahatma Gandhi heard about the violence at Chauri Chaura, he made a very important decision. He called for an immediate halt to the non-cooperation movement. This decision reflected Gandhi's commitment to nonviolence and his belief that true independence could only be achieved through peaceful means. This event underscores a key theme of the overall movement, the importance of maintaining nonviolence, even in the face of provocation or violence. In February 1922, Mahatma Gandhi made the decision to withdraw the non-cooperation movement. He believed that the movement was starting to turn violent in many places, which was a serious concern. At the same time, the Congress leaders were growing tired of these large-scale mass struggles. They wanted to shift their focus towards participating in elections, which had been set up by the Government of India Act of 1919. They felt it was important to oppose British policies within the councils and to argue for reforms from within the system. To achieve this, leaders like C.R. Duz and Motilal Nehru formed the Swaraj Party within the Congress, aiming to return to council politics and push for self-rule through parliamentary means. On the other hand, leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhas Chandra Bose were pressing for more radical action, advocating for mass agitation and direct action against British rule. This period marks a crucial turning point, where the strategies within the independence movement started to diverge, some leaders favoring participation in constitutional avenues, while others pushed for more direct, mass-based protests. It's a reflection of the broader debate about how best to achieve independence, which connects to our overall theme of evolving strategies in the struggle for freedom. As we look at this slide, let's focus on how agricultural prices started to decline from 1926 and then sharply collapsed after 1930. This period marked a significant shift in the rural economy. As demand for agricultural goods decreased and exports also declined, peasants faced increasing difficulties. They struggled to sell their harvests and pay their revenues, which created a lot of distress in the countryside. By 1930, this turmoil was quite evident, with widespread discontent among farmers and rural communities. Now, this situation was part of a larger global issue, the Great Depression, that had a profound impact on India. It triggered internal debates and divisions within Indian society and politics. Two key factors emerged from this chaos, shaping the course of Indian political movements. So, understanding this economic context helps us see how external global crises can influence internal political dynamics, especially in a colonial setting. So, the Tory government in Britain decided to establish a statutory commission, led by Sir John Simon. This move was primarily a response to the rising nationalist movements in India, which demanded more self-governance. The main goal of the commission was to work out a new constitutional framework for India. However, there was a significant issue. None of the members of this commission were Indian. All of them were British, which immediately raised questions about representation and fairness. When the Simon Commission finally arrived in India in 1928, it was met with fierce opposition. The Indian people responded with the slogan, "Go back, Simon," symbolizing their rejection of a commission that did not include Indian voices. This event was a crucial moment in the struggle for independence, highlighting the deep mistrust of British intentions and setting the stage for more demands for self-rule. In October 1929, Lord Irwin made a somewhat vague offer of dominion status to India, and he also announced the idea of a round-table conference to discuss the future of India's constitution. However, this move didn't quite satisfy the Congress members, and radicals within the movement became more assertive and vocal about their demands. By December 1929, under the leadership of Jawaharlal Nehru, the Lahore Congress took a significant step forward by formalizing the demand for Purna Swaraj, which means complete independence for India. It was during this period that it was declared that January 26, 1930, would be celebrated as Independence Day, marking a clear assertion of India's desire for full sovereignty. This sequence of events set the stage for the first Round Table Conference, which was a crucial step in the struggle for independence. Gandhiji saw salt as a powerful symbol that could unite the entire nation, because salt was something everyone, whether rich or poor, consumed daily. It's a simple but essential ingredient in our food. The British government's tax on salt and its monopoly over salt production exposed the harshest aspects of colonial rule, how oppressive and unjust it was. On 31 January 1930, Gandhiji wrote a letter to Viceroy Irwin, outlining 11 demands. This letter was more than just a list. It was an ultimatum. It stated that if these demands were not met by 11 March, the Indian National Congress would launch a civil disobedience campaign. This was a pivotal moment, as it marked the beginning of a direct challenge to colonial authority, emphasizing that Indians would no longer accept such unjust laws. The salt tax, therefore, became a symbol of resistance, showing how a simple act like making salt could unite people across social divides and inspire a collective fight for independence. Irwin was unwilling to negotiate with Mahatma Gandhi, which led Gandhi to take a bold and historic step. On March 12, 1930, Gandhi began his famous Salt March, a peaceful protest against British salt taxes and policies. He was accompanied by 78 trusted volunteers, and together they started walking towards Dandi. They covered about 10 miles each day, demonstrating commitment and resilience. The journey from Sabarmati to Dandi was approximately 240 miles long, and it took them 24 days to complete. This march wasn't just about making salt. It symbolized the fight against colonial rule and inspired millions to stand up for their rights. The march officially started on April 6, 1930, marking the beginning of the civil disobedience movement. This entire effort showed Gandhi's leadership and the power of nonviolent protest, reinforcing the theme of peaceful resistance as a means to achieve freedom. It was a significant moment in India's struggle for independence, emphasizing perseverance and collective action. During the Salt March, Mahatma Gandhi was initially accompanied by just 78 volunteers. But as they made their way, something incredible happened. Thousands of people joined them along the way. This mass participation really showed the power of collective action and how a simple act of civil disobedience could inspire so many. It wasn't just about breaking the salt laws. It was about uniting people across India, rallying them around a common cause for independence. The Salt March became a symbol of peaceful resistance and demonstrated how leadership combined with mass support could challenge colonial authority. This march was a pivotal moment in the fight for freedom, highlighting the importance of perseverance, nonviolence, and community solidarity. The movement we're discussing here was quite different from the non-cooperation movement in several key ways. Unlike before, people were asked not only to refuse cooperation with the British authorities, but also to actively break the laws imposed on them. For example, thousands of Indians across different regions deliberately broke the salt law by manufacturing salt themselves and even demonstrated in front of government salt factories. This was a powerful act of defiance, showing that they were willing to challenge laws that oppressed them. As the movement gained momentum, it extended beyond salt. People started boycotting foreign cloth and even picketing liquor shops, which were seen as symbols of foreign influence and exploitation. Peasants also refused to pay chowkidari taxes, and in many villages, village officials resigned as a form of protest. Another significant aspect was the involvement of forest communities. Many of them violated forest laws by going into reserved forests to collect firewood and graze their cattle, actions that were strictly prohibited under colonial regulations. All these acts of civil disobedience reflected a broader strategy of nonviolent resistance, aimed at undermining the authority of the British and asserting Indian self-reliance. It was a movement rooted in defiance, but carried out with discipline and a clear message. Indians would no longer accept unjust laws. This approach marked a more active and widespread form of resistance, connecting directly to the larger theme of challenging colonial rule through people's collective action. As the British government intensified its repression, they started arresting key leaders of the Indian National Congress. One notable figure was Abdul Ghaffar Khan, a devoted disciple of Gandhiji, who was arrested in April 1930. This arrest sparked a fierce reaction among the people, especially in Peshawar, where crowds gathered in anger and frustration. They demonstrated in the streets, facing armored cars and police firing into the crowds, showing their defiance and determination. Then, when Mahatma Gandhi himself was arrested a month later, the protests escalated even further. In Sholapur, industrial workers responded by attacking police posts, municipal buildings, law courts, and railway stations, targets that symbolized British control. The situation turned violent, with peaceful satyagrahis being attacked, women and children beaten, and around 100,000 people being arrested. This period clearly highlights the oppressive measures the government used to suppress the freedom movement, but it also underscores the resilience and courage of the Indian people in their fight for independence. On 5 March 1931, Mahatma Gandhi decided to call off the movement and entered into a pact with Lord Irwin. This was a significant moment because, through this agreement, Gandhiji agreed to participate in the Second Round Table Conference in London. In return, the government committed to releasing political prisoners who had been incarcerated during the protests. Later that year, in December 1931, Gandhiji traveled to London for the conference, hopeful about reaching an understanding. However, unfortunately, the negotiations broke down, and Gandhiji returned disappointed, feeling that the talks hadn't achieved what they set out to do. When Gandhiji came back to India, he found that the government had already begun a new cycle of repression. Leaders like Ghaffar Khan and Jawaharlal Nehru were thrown into jail. The government even declared the Congress illegal, and they imposed strict measures to prevent meetings, demonstrations, and boycotts, essentially trying to suppress the growing nationalist movement. This period clearly shows the ongoing struggle between Gandhi's efforts for negotiation and the government's repressive response, highlighting the complex path toward India's independence. Rich peasant communities like the Patidars of Gujarat and the Jats of Uttar Pradesh played an active role in the movement. These communities were heavily affected by the trade depression and the falling prices, which made it difficult for them to pay the revenue demanded by the government. When the government refused to reduce the revenue demand, it created widespread resentment among these peasants. They didn't just feel frustrated. They took action by organizing boycott programs as part of the civil disobedience movement. For them, Swaraj, or self-rule, meant fighting against these high revenue demands that burdened their livelihoods. Their participation showed how economic hardships could motivate communities to stand up and demand change. The movement among the poor peasantry was quite complex. It wasn't just about wanting to lower the revenue demands imposed on them. They also aimed to decrease the rent they had to pay. As the depression dragged on, their cash incomes continued to shrink, making it increasingly difficult for small tenants to meet their rent obligations. This economic hardship pushed many peasants to join various radical movements, which were often led by socialists and communists. However, the relationship between these movements and the Indian National Congress was complicated. Congress was generally unwilling to support campaigns like no rent protests in most areas, which created a level of uncertainty about how the peasants' demands would be addressed and how these movements might evolve. Overall, this highlights the growing frustration and the push for greater economic and social justice among the peasantry during this period. Their struggles were not just about economic hardship, but also about asserting their rights and challenging existing authorities. During the time of the First World War, Indian merchants experienced significant profits, which in turn made them quite powerful. They were keen on protecting their interests, especially against the influx of foreign goods. One of their strategies was to push for a rupee-sterling foreign exchange ratio that would make importing foreign products more expensive and less attractive. To organize and strengthen their business interests, these merchants established key associations like the Indian Industrial and Commercial Congress in 1920 and the Federation of the Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries in 1927. Prominent leaders such as Purushottamdas Thakurdas and G.D. Birla played vital roles in guiding these organizations. At the same time, they were wary of the rising militant activities and the growing influence of socialism among workers. They feared that such developments could threaten their business stability and economic dominance. Overall, this slide highlights how the Indian business class, during this period, was focused on safeguarding their economic interests amidst a changing political and social landscape. Their actions were driven by a desire to maintain stability and control in the face of emerging challenges. The participation of the industrial workers in the civil disobedience movement was quite limited, and this is an important point to understand. Except for Nagpur, where their involvement was more noticeable, most industrial workers did not actively take part in the movement in large numbers. As the Indian National Congress grew closer to the industrialists, the workers tended to stay aloof or distant from the political activities. However, it's interesting to note that despite their overall reluctance, some workers did adopt certain Gandhian programs. For example, they participated in the boycott of foreign goods, which was a significant part of Gandhi's strategy, and they also struggled against low wages and poor working conditions, which directly affected their daily lives. There were notable instances of protests, like the railway workers' strike in 1930 and the dock workers' strike in 1932, which show that some sections of industrial workers did take collective action. Additionally, in 1930, thousands of workers in the Chotanagpur tin mines donned Gandhi caps, symbolizing their support, and actively participated in protest rallies and boycott campaigns. So, while their overall participation was limited, these examples highlight the efforts and struggles of industrial workers during this period, and how their issues intersected with the broader independence movement. Their involvement, though not mass, was significant in its own way, especially in highlighting the connection between economic conditions and political activism. The major feature of the civil disobedience movement was the large-scale participation of women, which was quite significant in shaping the movement's impact. Women took part in protest marches, demonstrating their commitment and courage. They also manufactured salt, directly challenging the British salt monopoly, and picketed foreign cloth and liquor shops to protest economic exploitation. Many women faced jail sentences for their activism, showing their readiness to sacrifice for the cause. In urban areas, these women often came from high-caste families, while in rural areas, they primarily belonged to wealthy peasant households. This highlights how the movement inspired women across different social backgrounds to get involved. What's really inspiring is how they were moved by Gandhiji's call, viewing service to the nation as a sacred duty, something that transcended social barriers. Gandhiji believed that it was the duty of women to look after the home and hearth, to be good mothers and wives, but he also recognized their vital role in the independence struggle. However, it's important to note that the Congress was initially reluctant to allow women to hold positions of authority within the organization. Despite this, women's participation was crucial, and their involvement helped to broaden the scope of the independence movement, making it more inclusive and representative of the entire society. Not all social groups were moved by the abstract concept of Swaraj. One such group was the Untouchables, who today call themselves Dalit or oppressed. Congress, in its political strategy, often ignored the Dalits to avoid offending the Sanatanis, the orthodox upper castes. However, Gandhiji took a different approach. He addressed them as Harijans, meaning children of God, and organized satyagraha campaigns to fight for their basic rights. He worked tirelessly to secure their entry into temples, access to public wells, tanks, roads, and schools. Gandhiji even set an example himself by cleaning toilets to dignify the work of the Bangi, the sweepers, and he persuaded upper castes to give up what he called the sin of untouchability. This was a significant step in addressing social injustice. Meanwhile, Dalit leaders began organizing themselves, demanding reserved seats in universities and separate electorates to ensure they could choose their representatives in legislative councils. These actions highlight the importance of social reform alongside political independence, emphasizing that Swaraj isn't just about independence from British rule, but also about justice and equality within society. In 1930, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar took a significant step by organizing the Dalits into the Depressed Classes Association. This was a crucial move to give a unified voice to the marginalized communities. During the Second Round Table Conference, Ambedkar clashed with Gandhiji over the issue of separate electorates for Dalits. Ambedkar demanded that Dalits be given their own separate voting rights to ensure political representation. When the British government agreed to Ambedkar's demand, Gandhiji responded with a powerful protest. He began a fast unto death. Gandhiji believed that allowing separate electorates would hinder the social integration of Dalits into the wider society, creating division rather than unity. Ultimately, Ambedkar realized the importance of social harmony and accepted Gandhiji's position. This compromise led to the Pune Pact in September 1932. The pact was a significant achievement because it secured reserved seats for Dalits, including scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, in the provincial and central legislative councils. However, these Dalit representatives would be elected by the general electorate, not through separate electorates. This was a key moment in the fight for Dalit rights, balancing political representation with social unity, and it connected directly to our broader theme of social justice and nation building. After the decline of the non-cooperation Khilafat movement, we see that a large section of Muslims started feeling more and more alienated from the Congress. This was a significant shift because it showed that the unity they once shared was beginning to fracture. From the mid-1920s, the Congress also became visibly associated with Hindu religious nationalist groups like the Hindu Mahasabha. This association further widened the gap between Hindus and Muslims, as it fostered a sense of exclusion among the Muslim community. As tensions grew, we noticed that relations between Hindus and Muslims worsened considerably. This deterioration led to riots and clashes erupting in various cities across the country. Each of these violent incidents only served to deepen the divide, making reconciliation more difficult and increasing mutual suspicion. These conflicts weren't just isolated incidents. They reflected a broader communal polarization that was taking hold. Now, regarding the Muslim League, it's important to understand its role during this period. The League's participation was often lukewarm, meaning they were somewhat hesitant or less active in engaging with the larger political movements of the time. This cautious approach was partly a response to the increasing alienation and the communal tensions we just discussed. Overall, this context highlights how the political landscape was shifting, with communities becoming more divided, and with organizations like the Muslim League trying to navigate these complex dynamics. In 1927, both Congress and the Muslim League made efforts to renegotiate their alliance, and it seemed like they might actually be able to forge a united front. One of the most important questions at that time was how to ensure proper representation in future assemblies. Muhammad Ali Jinnah was willing to demand separate electorates for Muslims, which meant Muslims would vote separately from Hindus to choose their representatives. In addition, they demanded reserved seats in the Central Assembly to guarantee Muslim representation. They also wanted control of power in provinces where Muslims were the majority, like Bengal and Punjab. Everyone hoped to resolve these issues at the All-Parties Conference in 1928, but that optimism faded when M.R. Jayakar of the Hindu Mahasabha strongly opposed any efforts at compromise, which made it clear that tensions would persist. Many Muslim leaders were deeply concerned about their community's status as a minority within India. As the civil disobedience movement began, this concern created an atmosphere of suspicion and distrust between different communities. Because many Muslims felt alienated from the Congress, they couldn't fully respond to the call for a united struggle. They were worried that their culture and identity might be overshadowed or lost under the dominance of a Hindu majority. This fear played a significant role in shaping the dynamics of the independence movement and the relationships between communities at that time. So, in this slide, we're looking at how nationalism really takes hold when people start to see themselves as part of the same nation. This sense of collective belonging doesn't happen overnight. It's built through shared experiences and a feeling that there's something unifying that ties everyone together. One powerful way this happens is through collective struggles. When people fight side by side, they develop a strong sense of unity and identity. But it's not just about shared struggles. There are also cultural elements that play a huge role in shaping nationalist feelings. Things like history, stories, folklore, songs, and even symbols and images. These all help to capture people's imagination and reinforce their sense of belonging. Think of how national stories or patriotic songs can evoke pride and a feeling of being part of something bigger. All these processes, these cultural and historical elements, work together to foster that collective sense of identity. And that, in turn, fuels the growth of nationalism, connecting individual identities to the larger idea of the nation. This slide really highlights how complex and multifaceted the development of nationalism is, blending shared struggles with cultural expressions to create a powerful sense of unity. Now, let's look at how the identity of a nation is often symbolized through a figure or an image. This helps people connect with and recognize the nation more easily. In the 20th century, especially with the rise of nationalism, India's identity became closely associated with the figure of Bharat Mata. This image was first created by Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, and it played a powerful role in inspiring patriotism. Bharat Mata is depicted as an ascetic figure, calm, composed, divine, and spiritual, embodying the soul of the nation. Over time, this image of Bharat Mata took many different forms, as it circulated through popular prints and was painted by various artists. This evolving symbolism helped unify people and foster a sense of collective identity, which ties into the larger theme of how nations cultivate national pride and unity through representations like this. In the late 19th century, India saw a growing movement among nationalists to preserve and revive traditional culture. They started recording folk tales sung by bards and took to touring villages to collect folk songs and legends firsthand. These stories were seen as a window into the authentic cultural roots of India, especially because many believed that outside influences had corrupted and damaged these traditions over time. In Bengal, Rabindranath Tagore was a key figure in this movement. He personally began collecting ballads, nursery rhymes, and myths, actively leading the effort to revive folk traditions. His work highlighted the importance of these stories as a vital part of India's cultural identity. Meanwhile, in Madras, Natsa Sastry made a significant contribution by publishing a comprehensive 4-volume collection called The Folklore of Southern India. He held a strong belief that folklore was not just entertainment, but was, in fact, a form of national literature that deserved recognition and preservation. Overall, these efforts underscore how folk tales and songs became a crucial part of reconnecting with India's true cultural heritage, helping to foster a sense of national pride and identity. Now, let's talk about how nationalist leaders began to recognize the power of icons and symbols in uniting people. During the Swadeshi movement in Bengal, for instance, a special flag was designed to represent the movement and its ideals. This flag was a tricolor, featuring red, green, and yellow, and it included some meaningful symbols. For example, there were 8 lotuses on the flag, which stood for the 8 provinces of British India, symbolizing unity across different regions. Additionally, the flag had a crescent moon, representing the Muslim community, and a sun, representing Hindus. Carrying this flag and holding it high during marches became more than just a display. It became a powerful act of defiance against colonial rule. It showed how symbols could inspire pride, solidarity, and resistance. So, in essence, these icons and symbols played a crucial role in mobilizing people and fostering a collective identity during the fight for independence. Thank you for being with me throughout this presentation. As we come to the final slide, I want to emphasize how, by the end of the 19th century, Indians started to develop a strong sense of pride in their nation. They realized that in order to build a confident identity, Indian history needed to be understood and interpreted differently. At that time, the British viewed Indians as backward and primitive, believing they were incapable of self-governance. But instead of accepting this narrative, Indians began to look into their past to uncover their true achievements. They started writing about the glorious developments in ancient India, highlighting periods when art, architecture, science, mathematics, religion, culture, law, philosophy, crafts, and trade all flourished. These nationalist histories served a vital purpose. They encouraged Indians to take pride in their rich heritage and to see their past achievements as a source of strength. More importantly, they motivated people to struggle for a better future, one where they could change the miserable conditions imposed under British rule. So this reinterpretation of history was not just about looking back. It was about inspiring a collective identity and a desire for progress. It's a key moment in understanding how Indians began to redefine their history to foster patriotism and resilience.